All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Riley Simon, and my project is called Bird Tales. Basically, I'm going to be telling you about some poetry and about some super cool birds. So first, my project has two major parts, and the first goal was to write and publish a chapbook of poetry about birds in nature. And if you're wondering, what's a chapbook? It's basically just a mini book. It's a short collection of some kind of literary work. In my case, it was a short collection of poetry. So before I could start writing, I had a lot of learning to do first, and so Miss Peterson connected me with a local published poet and author, Maureen Thorson, and that kind of led to the messily scribbled notes you see in the middle there. I don't want you to even try to read it. I don't even think that I can at this point, but the point is that it took a lot of that note-taking, it took a lot of research to get from the notes you see in the middle to the finished product of a poem you see on the right. And one of the biggest parts of that process I found was inspiration. So after talking to Maureen, I found that the biggest part to having good poetry, or writing good poetry, is inspiration. And so I spent the first week of my project out in nature gathering that inspiration. And I used a method called a brain dump, which is basically when you go out into whatever you want to observe, you write in a notebook some unfiltered observations of the world around you, and then you come back to it later, take pieces of it, and write poetry about it. And so I used that method along with doing lots of research, reading lots of poems, and learning about all sorts of different forms of poems to actually get ready to start writing. And so then I spent my second week just writing a ton of really terrible poetry. I sat outside under a tree in my backyard for hours and just brain dumped as much on the page as I could until I could finally get to some sort of finished products. And so I ended up with 10 finished poems that I put together into a manuscript. And I ended up with 6 free-form poems, 1 villanelle, a modified acrostic poem, a sonnet, and a cinquain poem. And after I came up with my 10 final drafts, it took me a little bit to kind of put together this manuscript. It definitely isn't something that I really know how to do, is to do any kind of digital design or anything, so that was kind of a challenge for me, but I had to arrange each poem so it looks kind of aesthetic, and in the end I think I ended up with a finished product that I'm happy with. Now the second part of my project is actually in this picture. Believe it or not, there is a bird in this picture, and to make it a little bit easier, it's right there in that circle, and if you still can't see it, sitting on a nest right where that arrow is pointing is a piping plover. So it is piping plover. I wish it was pronounced piping plover, but I was talking to some biologists and apparently it's piping plover. But the second goal in my project was to have a direct impact on these piping plover populations by volunteering with the Maine Audubon. And I volunteered with the Maine Audubon's Piping Plover Project. And through volunteering with this project, I learned what makes these birds so cool and what makes them so important and why it's important that we protect them. First of all, I think they're super cute. I have a little video here of one scurrying across the beach. It's hard to see, but right there in the middle, there he goes. They're little birds, and I got another little picture up here. They're very elusive, though, so hard to get pictures of them. But not only are they super cute, they're also super cool. You don't want to be fooled by their small size. They're about like that big, I think, and I mean, that's not a very scientific, they're like that big. But even despite their small size, they migrate all up and down the east coast of the United States, and they live from about southeastern Canada down to Florida and the Bahamas. And they only breed from around the Carolinas up to southeastern Canada, and that makes Maine a really important part of where they live because it's one of the few breeding grounds. And unfortunately, the pipe is endangered in the state of Maine. They live and nest on all of the beaches that we all go to in the summer, so that means Old Orchard Beach, Pine Point Beach, Reed State Park, Popham Beach. And so in my volunteering with the Piping Plover Project, I walked these beaches in pairs and in teams of 3, and we surveyed the beach, meaning we kept track of how many nesting pairs were on each beach, as well as putting up management. And so we looked out for any plover tracks or plover scrapes, which scrapes are just little indents in the sand where male plovers have dug out the sand, and they're basically potential nests. And so we looked out for those, looked out for nests, and then put up management, which is basically any signs or stake and twine fencing, anywhere we saw any bird activity, just to give these birds space to nest and to hatch their eggs. And this helps to keep that human activity on these beaches from these birds and helps get them off that endangered species list. Now, in extreme cases, we have to use what are called exclosures. And so there's kind of hard to see here, but exclosures basically look like they're caging in these nests, which is not the case. The birds can come and go as they please. However, it keeps out predators like crows or other small mammals, and it also, most importantly, keeps people at a safe distance from the nests and things like unleashed dogs. You can see the necessity for them, especially in the left picture here or the picture on the right. Those are both at Old Orchard Beach, and in the picture on the left, these birds decided it was a good idea to make a nest right in the middle of an open beach in front of a motel, which, that's not an ideal place. If we didn't put up this exclosure, then the nest probably would have, and the eggs would have been lost, which would have been really unfortunate. And so through surveying, putting up these management, putting up the exclosures, the Piping Plover Project hopes to get the piping plovers off of the endangered species list, and I'm excited to have played a small role in doing that. And luckily, the numbers are up for piping plovers. Since early 2000s, late 90s, they had only about 30 nesting pairs, and now there are about 125 at least in the state of Maine, which is great, but we still have to continue to take steps to protect these birds, and that means all of you as well. When you go to the beach, you want to stay away from the dune grass. That's where they nest. Make sure you keep your distance from management and keep your dogs on a leash, because 125 nesting pairs is not nearly enough for the entire state of Maine, and so we have to continue to protect these birds. Now, to reflect on my project, some successes. First of all, just being able to play a role in protecting these piping plovers was really exciting for me, because I learned about these birds last year during an independent study about marine birds, and now to have that firsthand experience with them was pretty great. Also, some unexpected knowledge that I gained. I got to ask the biologists that I work with lots of questions about how they got to the point that they were, because it is a possible career path for me, so that was really valuable knowledge. Also, just to have this finished product of a chapbook is really satisfying, to have that just finished product of poetry that I've been working so long on. And actually, if you want to read any of it, I'm gonna have a QR code at the end if anyone wants to see that finished manuscript. Now, there were definitely a few challenges along the way. Organization was kind of a problem for me. With all the time that I had, I sometimes didn't know exactly where I should be. I actually slept through the first morning I was supposed to be volunteering with the Audubon. I just didn't set an alarm or something, so I completely missed that, and that was an unfortunate organizational moment. Poetry is just really hard to write. I didn't realize how long it took. It turns out you have to be really precise with your word choice, and so it took a lot longer than I thought to get a finished product of poetry. And then publishing was definitely my biggest challenge throughout this, because I had originally wanted to publish my manuscript through Amazon's self-publishing service. However, I didn't format the manuscript correctly, and so I decided, instead of scrapping the whole thing and reformatting it using a different program, that I would just keep the original manuscript and distribute it for free. Maybe I'll publish it in the future. Now, some skills from FHS that I used in my project. Organization, that's debatable considering my mishap with sleeping in, but it's definitely helpful. My English classes definitely prepared me for an independent writing project, and also the skills of communication and independence were helpful as well. Now, a few takeaways. First of all, just being able to learn about seabirds. I'm excited to have a bit of an expert opinion on these piping plovers that I can share with other people. And actually, just a little tip, it's a little difficult to see in this picture, but these are piping plover tracks. And to look out for them, you can see kind of a three-pronged track in the sand. So they don't have a back toe, so it's just three little toes. And they walk kind of in a straight line because they walk pigeon-toed, which is kind of the reason they look so cute when they're scurrying across the beach. But you can keep a lookout for them back in the dunes where they nest, as well as down by the shore where they forage. And also, a big takeaway for me is kind of the inspiration that this project has led to. I can see myself continuing with the work that I've started in this project. First of all, I plan on volunteering with the Piping Plover Project through the summer, and they also mentioned that I could apply to be an intern with them after my first year of college, which would be great. I could be working full-time with this team of Audubon biologists, which could be pretty fun. And then also, I just know I want to keep writing. I found it was really interesting, and maybe I'll actually end up publishing something in the future. Now, a few thank yous. Thank you to Ms. Girardin for being an amazing project advisor. Thank you to Laura and all the other wildlife biologists with the Audubon. Thank you to Maureen for all of the information and resources. Thank you to FHS, Ms. Peterson, and Ms. Levitt for this opportunity. And thank you to my parents for supporting me through high school and this project. And then I have one more thing. I have one poem that I'm going to share from my chapbook. It's actually inspired by this picture that Savannah sent me. And it's, so you wanted me to write a poem about this bird, so that's what this is, and it's called Mystery Bird. Sell me a song, mystery bird. Let me lurk, shrouded in secret, behind the bug screen. Allow me a listen, mystery bird. Ruffle red feathers, billowed into a bloom, scarlet and soft from your breast, in a striking performance. Give me a show, mystery bird. Bang your beak on the rugged roof tiles, join nature's joyous chorus. In rapturous rhythm, play me your beat, mystery bird. Sing a spirited goodbye, chatter with a charming cackle, let arrogance through your beak, draw me in, mystery bird. Cock your curious head, fiercely flick your wings, show me your sleek tail as it steers you towards the oak and gets lost in its branches. Be gone, mystery bird. Thank you, and do you have any questions? Okay, so the question was to tell a bit more about my editing process, and I would say it wasn't super organized. I definitely didn't do it the way I probably should have with a set process. I kind of just read it a bunch, made sure my grammar was good, and just changed what I thought would sound good. There wasn't a whole lot of process to it, really. Cook?
Did you also do the illustration for your chapbook?
Actually, this is an illustration by Everett. He did like a digital art of Piping Plover, so. Ms. Curry?
Your poetry sounds like song lyrics. Do you ever write song lyrics?
I haven't. I've thought about it before, but no, I haven't. Molly?
What was your favorite poem that you wrote?
So the question was what's my favorite poem that I wrote, and it might be the one that I read to you. There's a couple, but yeah, I'd say the one that I read to you is probably my favorite.
Were you planning on writing this book of poems about birds, or is that just kind of how it evolved?
The question was if I was planning on writing this book of poems about birds, and actually, yeah, the original plan was kind of the whole project to be about birds, and so it was the plan from the beginning to write just the poetry about birds, and I did end up with a couple that weren't about birds, which is, I mean, it's fine, I guess, because I liked them, I wanted to include them, so that was kind of how it went. Ms. Cook?
Wondering on the piping plovers, do they return to the same spots every year?
So the question was if the piping plovers return to the same spots every year, and it's interesting because sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. A lot of times they'll end up within like 125 feet of their nest from the year before, but it's not like they're committed to a single spot for their whole lifetime. Kate?
Why did you choose the piping plover over?
Well, it was kind of random. The question was why I chose the piping plover over other birds, and it was kind of random how I got connected with this project through the Maine Audubon. I just had been talking to someone who had worked with the project in the past. So, I mean, I was just kind of lucky to have ended up with these birds because I had already learned about them in the past, but to answer your question, how I ended up with it was just pretty random. There wasn't a real reason to end up with this project. It just kind of fell in my lap.
Read your card.
All right, so the first 2 weeks were spent researching and designing what we were going to build for our project. First we had to decide what plants we wanted to grow, and we narrowed it down to lettuce, strawberries, or herbs. We decided to go with lettuce because lettuce is generally pretty easy to grow, and it also has the shortest growing time of 30 days, so it would be easiest to track its progress. We also had to decide what fish we wanted to use. Most aquaponic systems use tilapia because they generally thrive in aquaponic systems and they can be eaten, so every part of the system is being used. However, we didn't want to use tilapia because they are expensive and pretty inaccessible. They're also a lot bigger than what a system of our size would be able to support. So instead we decided to use bait fish because bait fish have been shown to do good in aquaponic systems, and we're also going to use them as bait. So that every part of the system will be being used.
So after we researched like the sort of things that we wanted to put into our